Chapter 2. He Gains a Home. As his boots struck the edge of the road, his bad ankle gave way under him, and Little John fell in a heap. For a moment he was afraid the truck would go past without anyone noticing him. Its headlights were on, but the beams were sweeping beyond him around the curve. He managed to struggle upright for a moment, then sank weakly to his knees. He had dropped his staff and found that he could hardly stand without it. The truck braked suddenly and stopped. A man leaned out and said in quick concern, "Hey there, young fellow. What seems to be wrong?" Little John opened his mouth soundlessly and raised one hand. He heard a woman's voice say, "For heaven's sake, children, let me out. I think the boy's hurt." Both doors of the truck flew open. The man stepped from the driver's side, and a boy and a girl tumbled from the other, followed by the woman. Little John saw that the girl was about his own size. The boy was much larger, but he seemed no older than himself. Both wore jackets and blue jeans like the woman. Though the man was nearer, he moved with a slight limp, and the woman reached him first. "My goodness, honey," she said, stooping and raising him gently. "Your face and hands are all scraped. Did you have a fall?" He nodded, and the man asked, "Are you hurt badly?" Little John shook his head. His eyes swung quickly from one to the other. The woman wore a green scarf around her bright hair. There were freckles across her lean cheeks and small laughter creases at the corners of her eyes and mouth. The man had a thick shock of dark hair graying at the temples. His face was ruddy, but deeply lined. The man said, "Can you tell us where you live, Sonny?" Little John shook his head again. There was sudden silence. The woman bit her lip, then asked quietly, "Can you understand what we are saying?" Again he nodded, and she said, "Thomas, I believe he's had a bad shock that keeps him from speaking. I hate to take him to the hospital. They're so impersonal. I think all he needs is a hot meal and some rest. We're taking him home with us," the man said definitely. "If he's been lost in the mountains all day, he's had it." He jerked his head at the boy and girl. "Sally, you and Brooks ride in the back of the truck. Mary—" "I'll carry him," she said. "He hardly weighs what Sally does." "Mommy," said Sally, speaking for the first time, Is he an Indian?" "I doubt it, and it wouldn't make any difference if he were a horned Andalusian with scales. All aboard." She swung Little John into the truck and settled him on the seat beside her. The two children scrambled into the back, and the man slid behind the wheel. While the truck wound along the road, Little John sat with his hands clenched, trying to suppress the sudden tears of thankfulness that ran down his cheeks. It was so wonderful to find people who were, well, like people should be. If only he could talk to them and explain. He tried to fit their spoken words to the thoughts he had felt in them. Their names he knew: Thomas, Mary, Sally, Brooks. His quick ears had already picked out scores of words for his eager memory to hold, but fitting them to the right thoughts would take time. He wished they would speak more to one another, but they said little during the short drive. Even so, he was aware of questions in all of them. The man: "Odd. Never saw a boy like him. Can't be from around here." The woman: "There's something very strange about him. It isn't just his long hair. His features are so sensitive, and his jacket. Where in the world can you find material like that?" The truck slowed presently, and the headlights swept a small brown building with a sign that read, "Beans Rock Shop, Smoky Mountain Gems." The truck turned into a lane beside it and climbed in second gear to a house nearly hidden by evergreens. There was a barn some distance behind the house, and Little John was aware of animals there waiting. A dog barked furiously at them until he gave it an answering thought of friendliness. They got out, and the woman carried him to the door, which the man opened with a key. Lights came on, and he was placed on a couch by a fireplace. It was a comfortable room, paneled in brown wood. He was aware of a flicker of pride in the man who had built this home with his own hands. The man said, "Brooks, you and Sally unload the groceries, then look after the stock." "Aw, Dad," Brooks grumbled. Please, can't we? Do as I say, and I'll handle the milking later. There'll be plenty of time to get acquainted with him. And if your mother will whip up some supper for us, I'll build a fire and play doctor. The boy needs attention. While the man kindled a fire, Little John removed his woven boots and carefully rolled his trousers above his knees. The man, turning, saw the bruises and whistled softly. He examined them carefully. You sure got banged up, young fellow, but I don't believe any bones are broken. Some of the Bean family liniment ought to do the trick. Good for everything from hornet stings to housemaid's knee. At that moment, as Brooks and his sister were bringing in the last of the groceries, a truck turned into the lane outside. Little John sat up quickly, his lips compressed. There was no mistaking the particular sound of that truck. Brooks peered out the window. I think it's Mr. Gilby Pitt's dad. Thomas Bean frowned. Wonder what Gilby... He stopped and exclaimed, Hey, young fellow, what's come over you? Little John was on his feet, trembling, trying to limp away. It was not fear that made him tremble, but a sudden return of the morning's shock when he had met an evil that was beyond his understanding. Mary Bean, entering the kitchen, put her arm around him and asked softly, Have you had trouble with Mr. Pitts, dear? At his tight face and nod, she frowned at her husband. Thomas, he's afraid of Gilby. I don't know what's happened, but I don't like... Take him into our bedroom and close the door, Thomas Bean said quickly. Knowing Gilby, I'd just as soon not... Save for the forgotten boots near the sofa, the room was clear when the knock sounded. After an exchange of greetings, Gilby Pitts entered. You folks just get home, Tom? He asked. Oh, a short while ago. See anything kinda unusual on the way back? Saw a nice sunset. Why? I don't pay no mind to sunsets. Gilby shuffled toward the fireplace, rubbing his unshaven jaw against his high shoulder. His narrow eyes darted around the room. There's queer things going on around here, Tom. I don't like it. You still got that bloodhound you raised? No. Traded it to Ben Whipple over at Windy Gap for a calf. Trying to train another dog, but he's a tough one. About got me licked. Sure wish you had that hound. I got a mind to go over to Whipple's and borrow him. What on earth for? Thomas Bean looked at Gilby curiously. Might as well tell you, Tom. There's a wild boy loose in this country. Seen him with my own eyes. Emma can tell you. I caught the little varmint, but Emma and me couldn't get nothing out of him. While we were trying to make him talk, he tore loose and took off like a streak. Never seen nothing like it. Cleared a fence like... A wild boy, Thomas exclaimed. Then he asked softly, What was he doing when you caught him, Gilby? Trespassing, and I got signs up. Oh, come now. No one worries about trespassing signs except in hunting season. You know that. We cross each other's land all the time. Saves miles of travel by the roads. I do it all the time when I'm out rock hunting. This is a heap different. I've been missing things. Did it ever occur to you, Thomas Bean interrupted, that this boy you're talking about could be lost and in need of help? Why, he could be badly hurt. He weren't hurt. You should have seen him jump. Then you must have frightened him badly. Why did you frighten him? The varmint come sneaking down to that west field of mine with the deer. With the deer. That's what I said, with the deer, just like he was one of 'em. Thomas pursed his lips, then said dryly, You wouldn't have been taking a shot at one, would you, Gilby? Gilby Pitt spat angrily into the fireplace. Fool deer been running my field. Man's got a right to scare him away. But the boy, he took off and got tangled in the barbed wire fence, or I'd never caught him. Acted like he didn't know the barbed wire was there, but he knowed it the second time when he busted loose, sailed right over it like he had wings. I tell you he's wild, wild as they come. Gilby stopped. In a lower tone he added, And that's not all. He ain't natural. I don't like unnatural things around. If there's more like 'em, we ought to know about it. There was a moment's silence. In the adjoining bedroom, where every word of the conversation could be heard, Mary Bean had opened the liniment bottle and was rubbing Little John's bruises. There was wonder in her eyes as she whispered, "Is that true about the deer? You were friendly with him?" He nodded and struggled to fit new words to thoughts, but the words were too few. "You're an odd one," she whispered. "I wish you could remember your name. Try real hard." John, he said. The name came unbidden to his lips. There was more to it, but the rest would not come out. They fell silent, for Thomas Bean was talking. "Gilby," said Thomas, "if I were you, I'd go sort of easy about this. Suppose a stray kid from over at the government camp got lost. If he fell and hurt himself, he could wander around in a daze, not even knowing who he was. If you actually found him and scared him away instead of trying to help him, you'd be in for a lot of criticism." "Well, maybe. What's more, this isn't hunting season, and you'd be in for more trouble if people thought you were trying to sneak some venison. Now listen to me, Tom. I'm only telling you the truth, Gilby. Anyway, it's quite possible that some Cherokee boys from the reservation came over this way on a hike. You know how they are in the spring." "Oh, I don't know. Emma didn't think he was no Cherokee." Gilby shuffled around and suddenly muttered, "I declare, them's queer-looking boots yonder." In the bedroom, Mary Bean stood up quickly, alarm in her blue eyes. She went to the door and started to slip into the hall, but at that instant Sally darted past her from the kitchen. "Hello, Mr. Gilby," Sally chirped brightly, scooping the boots from under Gilby Pitt's nose. "My goodness, Mommy! Well, scout me if I didn't get the mud off these." She skipped back into the kitchen, calling, "Mommy, when are you going to have supper? I'm hungry." "Coming in a minute, dear," her mother answered. Gilby Pitt scowled, rubbed his chin on his high shoulder, and finally shambled toward the door. "Reckon I'll be going, Tom. Let me know if you hear anything." "Sure will. Be seeing you." No one said a word until Gilby Pitt's truck was safely down the road. Then Thomas expelled a long breath. "Confounded old skinflint," he muttered. "Do you think he suspected anything?" Mary said, bringing Little John back into the room. "Probably not. He's just nosy. I only wish he hadn't seen the boy this morning. But maybe I've calmed him down enough so he won't do anything." He grinned suddenly at his daughter. "Thanks, Sally, for snatching the boots. That was quick thinking." "I deserve a dime for that," Sally said pertly, holding out her hand. "Fork over," she demanded. "Don't be a stingy puss." "Mercenary wretch," he growled, giving her the dime. He stooped and kissed her. "I'm not mercenary," she said. "See, I can give as well as receive." She pressed the dime into Little John's hand. "It's yours, and I hope you stay with us a long time." Brooks Bean, who had temporarily forgotten his chores, watched the exchange with interest. Abruptly he burst out, "Say, Guy, didn't you ever see a dime before?" "His name is John," said Mary Bean. "Like short for Jonathan. His name is all he can remember at the moment." But jumping smoke," Brooks persisted. "A dime's a dime. Don't you know what money is, John?" Little John shook his head. "But you must know English or you wouldn't know what we're saying," Brooks went on, baffled. "So you must know about money." Mary Bean said firmly, "We've questioned him enough for one evening. After all, if you had a bump on your head as big as his, you wouldn't know which way was up. John's had a pretty bad day. What he needs is something to eat and a good night's rest. Tomorrow's Sunday, and there'll be plenty of time to talk." There was only one other surprise that evening. They had scrambled eggs for supper, along with some of Mary Bean's home-canned vegetables, generous slices of baked ham, and some fried chicken left over from the day before. Little John ate ravenously of everything but the ham and the chicken, which he refused to touch. He began to nod at the table and was sound asleep before he could finish undressing for bed. He shared Brooks's bed that night and wore a pair of old pajamas much too large for him that Brooks had outgrown.